Hi, I'm Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Chasing Energy. I'm your host. I am a former endurance athlete, and I am a parent who is trying to share tips on how you can have a better life through managing your energy. It's fun stuff. We talk about mindset, fitness, and nutrition, and we have different guests that share on those insights. And today's guest is no exception. Scott Chaverri is the CEO of the MITOREDLIGHT company. I was wanting him on my show for a while. I'd heard a couple other interviews he had done maybe a year ago, and I actually own one of his products. This is the first time I will have an affiliate code in my podcast. And full disclosure, I had that code a long time ago because I recommended this device to my friends, and I wanted to get them a discount. And it gives you, I think, 5 or 6% off the product price. If you use the affiliate code, it gives me a little something too, which is helpful. If you do decide you want one, that's up to you, but please use the code. Things we will talk about today with Scott. He had a successful career in corporate finance. He was always a biohacker looking to improve his life. Sounds a lot like someone I know. And he decided to go out on his own and do what he was passionate about, which was this red light therapy and sort of the way that this product hits the market. It is the way that I found it was I noticed in a lot of the YouTube reviews, it would rank super high, but it was also the most cost affordable. There are actually a lot of red light products that are 2 and 3 times as expensive as this and pretty much do the same thing. So I was very happy with the product. I've had it for about a year, and this is not a promotion saying that you need to get one of these. And in fact, one of the things that Scott preaches is that if you look at the 5 pillars of health, which is diet, exercise, sleep, mindset, and community, that's where you start with managing your health. Things like this device, it's going to help you get an edge if you're a knowledge worker who, for example, can't get as much direct sunlight in their day as they need to, or maybe have problems unwinding. I find it very relaxing, actually, and it's good for muscle recovery as well. We get into his favorite supplements, which it's a question I'm asking more and more guests lately. What are your top 3 go-to supplements? As opposed to the question I used to ask, if you recall, if you're one of the 2 listeners who have followed the podcast since the beginning, I used to ask people, what do you recommend for people who are trying to manage their energy? And the problem was that question was, it almost always started with sleep. And so I've kind of expanded on it and just challenged my guest. Give me what you're doing now. Tell me what you're doing now, because what you see a lot of influencers and celebrities say is, listen to your body. And that's absolutely true. It's also not that helpful. There's times where we want guidance. We want to try something new, and we're listening to our body, but we don't know what to throw at it. So it gives us ideas as to what to try. And if you'd like the Cliff Notes here, just open the show notes. It lists all this information, including Scott's top 3 supplements, which you will find out. And we talk about some of the more recent studies in sleep, including one that he is sponsoring and one with some Chinese basketball players. Scott loves to cite data, and I appreciate that about him. He doesn't just throw out a bunch of things saying that this is going to make your life better no matter what. No, he's saying that there's a lot of data that supports this device, and that's part of what I sort of came on board with it from is, the data look good. I've been using it about a year. I'm pretty happy with it. Questions, comments, I'd love to hear them. Just shoot me a note through social media. On Instagram, I'm at DP Lucas. And I don't get, I would love if you could post a review on the podcast. Hope you enjoy it. We have so many good interviews that I have recorded in the last week with a bunch of guests that have reached out to me wanting to be on the podcast. I'm truly honored that they wanted to connect. And Scott is no exception to that. I was super proud when I think about the trials that come with having a podcast and doing this in your spare time, knowing that these guests are sacrificing their time to help you, and you are doing it to help others. It's kind of like this positive karma-like circle where we're feeding the positive energy that helps us to keep from getting exhausted and just falling into the resistance. So thank you for the people who took the time to write reviews, and thank you for the people who reach out on social media and sort of say, thanks, I enjoyed the podcast. The download numbers have improved dramatically. Thank you so much. Scott Chaverri, welcome to Chasing Energy, man.
What's going on? Happy to be here.
Yeah. And for the listeners, you are wearing your Charged by MITORED.
I am.
Yeah. When we first talked a few weeks ago, I sort of inundated you because I just admire you so much as an entrepreneur. As far as, how old are you, Scott?
47.
Okay. Neither of us are spring chickens. And to go out, and you were clearly pretty successful before you did MITORED, and to take the initiative. What I'd like you to share first and foremost is what drew you to sort of take the steps involved in breaking out of your comfort and creating something new for the world.
Oh boy, that's a multifaceted question and answer. Obviously, it was a confluence of events that kind of led me to that. You know, I like you said, I got an MBA in 2004. I worked in finance and corporate finance for Fortune 500 companies, several of them for 17 years or so. And it was a good career. I could have just coasted, but I never was really passionate about it. And I think there are a lot of people that feel the same way, right? So you kind of, you know, a lot of people, I think, you know, they get comfortable and if you're in a good career, you don't necessarily want to take a risk and go and try to be an entrepreneur. But, you know, I was never passionate about it, and I always was passionate about health and wellness. So, and I felt like my life could be architected better if I found a way to synergize my passions with my work. And so that's really what I spent a lot of time doing, was learning more about health and wellness, and then thinking about where there might be opportunities to kind of drive an income from it and separate from corporate America. So it took me a long time to figure it out, but I'm very thankful that I did.
And what drove you towards the niche of the red light?
Well, I'm a biohacker at heart, so I've been, you know, learning and researching for at least 15 years. I mean, I've eaten a pretty paleo diet for at least 15 years. I was joking with somebody that was in here last week that I haven't had a donut in, you know, like 20 years. And so I've definitely lived it. And so I've tried all of the different technologies and hacks and supplements. I mean, you name it, I've probably tried it. And so light therapy got on my radar about 7 years ago. So I tried it and I liked it. I noticed that I sleep better. I had really bad insomnia actually in my 20s and 30s, and I finally figured that out. And then I started incorporating, so that's by getting rid of the blue light and some of the artificial light at the right times of day. That was my solve. And then so the flip side of that coin is, okay, maybe we should supplement with some beneficial types of light. So that's where I got into light therapy. And then I just realized that the devices that were on the market at the time were very expensive. Yeah. And so it wasn't really rocket surgery. It was like, I wonder if I can figure out a way to bring something to market that's less expensive. That's really how it started. And it was for my own kind of solve. And so I spent about 6 months prototyping, and then we launched in January 2019.
Yeah, that's called me-search word. Yeah, there you go. Okay. So you said, by the way, you said rocket surgery. I don't know if that was a Freudian thing or not.
No, that's just one of the terms I like to use.
Oh, okay.
when I'm making light of things.
No, and I'll add one thing you don't hear, because like you, I was a big part of what drew me to them was the sleep factor. And I like you, I started noticing if I turned off my phone and my technology, I tended to, the older I get, the more I need what I call transition space between, say, working me and relaxing me and, you know, whatever, social me. There's a little bit of a gate there where I used to be able to jump from one to the other. And all I was going to add was I started making a rule that after 9 o'clock, it was only candles in the house.
That's perfect. And for me, it's 9:30.
Yeah.
So, I notice if I go past 9:30, any screens, even with blue blocking glasses on, I don't sleep as well.
It's worse if it's anything. If I have something on my phone where I scroll, my mind has a hard time letting go of that even as opposed to watching TV, which is not great, but it's the scrolling it gets my mind spinning much more than say passively watching TV. But the one thing I wanted to add was you don't hear this very often, Scott. I started noticing a few weeks ago that just in general, by only having the candles in the house and stuff, and I'm just happier. Like I find myself going, I'm just much more content when I go to bed and less anxious. It's not just the blue light. I just find myself to be much more relaxed.
Totally agree. It's very soothing. Our house is very strange. I mean, it gets very dark. The sun goes down, our house is very dark. And we don't use any light up above in the ceiling after the sunset. That's also part of it too. Like those receptors are actually in the bottom of your eyeball, the bottom. And so there's a difference between having the light up high and having it down low. Let's say where a fire would typically be, like down on the ground. And so I think you want red and orange spectrum, and you want the light low to the ground if you're really trying to optimize for that. And very, very dim.
First, I've heard of the height of the light. That's good to know.
Yeah, it's crazy how fine-tuned and amazing our bodies are. That is even that specific where those receptors are in the bottom of the eyeball.
It really is. And when you think about the fact that the body's had many thousands of years to figure out what works, and we're just now starting to unlock, oh yeah, we got to get back to basics. I'll skip ahead to a question since you brought that up. You had mentioned the best time of the day to use the red light. It was around sunrise and sunset, correct?
Well, I don't know that we know for sure. I think so. When I was asked that question in the past, I used to say, well, if we're going to use nature as a guide, on balance, we get the most red and near infrared light around sunrise and sunset relative to the UV light that makes it through the atmosphere. Because no UV typically makes it to the atmosphere early in the day. It's just midday, like between 10 and 2, depending on latitude, that you get the UV. So on balance, sunrise and sunset, and that's also, of course, why the sky tends to be orange or reddish in sunrise and sunset. So I used to say that if I'm using nature as a guide, perhaps that would be the best time. But the flip side to that is that we get exposure to red and near infrared all day long. So whether it's early morning, midday, it just happens to be coupled with UV at midday typically. And so I think any time during the day, so generally my answer is just use it during the day when the sun is out, when you're most likely to use it, and don't suffer from failure to implement, right? Because the problem is if you start thinking about, oh, this is the optimal time, and let's say, okay, sunset's the optimal time, the day gets away from you and then you don't do it, and then you don't get any benefit, right? So I like to do it in the morning because I always get it done. Like it's done, it's part of my routine, it's done, and then I'm off to work.
You remind me of when I get the question of what's the best piece of workout equipment to have at home, and the answer is the one you'll use, right?
Right.
I don't care if you get a rowing machine or elliptical or a treadmill. It's like whatever it is that you're actually going to use the most often is by far the most important thing. So Will said there, this one of the many things I like about you, Scott, is even when you answered that question, you preface things by saying, this is what I'd said historically, or you'll say things like, we believe that this, but you tend to throw a lot of science into your answers. And what I love about that is we say, based on the data we have, this is what we can believe. That may be turned on its head in a few years, but for right now, that's as good as we know, which to me is so much better than saying, well, I happen to know for a fact that this is the best way to do everything. And
right. I tend to be wary of folks that speak that way in general. Yeah.
Anytime you hear the phrase always and never, your eyebrow should raise. Yeah. So I actually found, I purchased a MITOPro 1500, have been very happy with it, which is why I was excited to get you on here. I've had it for a year now. And it was through YouTube, which I'll put this in the show notes, Alex Fergus, who did a very detailed review of something like, it was at least a dozen panels.
Yeah, I think it was 12.
Most of which were much more expensive than the MITOPro. And what I'll say about the MITOPro is it is a no-frills device that is exceptionally good for the value you get. It's priced very affordably, and I tell people, I guess I can say this, you don't have to buy a Juve to get red light therapy, which is what everybody finds in their searches or whatever. And I say, you don't have to pay that. There's very good products that will do the at least good or better job and don't cost that much. So just know that regardless of your budget, there's other options out there, right?
Well, I agree, and I would say that that's just generally part of my personality and our approach. I survey the landscape, and we want to. Personally, I want to excel in all facets of my life, and I want our company and our business to excel on all aspects of what it means to run a successful business. And that means having the best product, the best value, the best service, the best warranty, the best communication, pre and post purchase, all of those things. Like, I personally challenge myself and my team to be number one in every possible metric. But it starts with the product. Is the product high quality, and is it exceptional value? Right? Because I come from modest means, and so I understand what it's like to part with that MITOPro is over $1,000. It's not a small investment, but for the light energy that it puts out, it's actually an exceptional value in the industry.
We are of this generation, both of us, Scott. I've heard your story of how you were raised on very modest means, and your mom, and both of us eating junk foods when we were young because that's what was available to us. And we're the first generation that is sort of turning things on the head of saying, what's the most affordable can be the most costly long term. When you think about the conveniences in life and what you're paying versus what you're going to have to pay, as I say, that's not the end of the bill. There's more bill to come or whatever. But how do you tend to balance, especially as a biohacker? I don't know if you have to run your expenses by your wife or whatever, but what do you tend to do when it comes to the logic of what you spend on yourself to improve? And then probably just as importantly, how do you assess the value? And you can give us a couple of examples of, I bought this for myself and this is where my expectations are. How do you gauge the value?
Well, so that's a great question. So I would say, go, and I hate to use the term low-hanging fruit, but for most people, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit out there that doesn't even involve investing any money.
Absolutely, yeah.
So if we think about, I used to have this saying, like the 5 pillars of health: diet, exercise, sleep, mindset, and community. And a lot of those things, like good sleep hygiene, doesn't even necessarily need to cost you any money. I mean, turning down the lights and blacking out the windows, and getting a pair of blue blocking glasses, which the first pair I ever bought was about $8. Those things don't cost money. So I would start there, start where the low hanging, zero cost. Going out in the sun in the morning doesn't cost you anything. Getting, and so you start there. A lot of people, with respect to, drinking clean water, breathing clean air, the water filters don't need to be that expensive. The diet, just eating real food and trying to just moving in the direction of eating real food versus packaged foods. Bananas and apples and avocados and eggs, calorically dense real food, I think, are quite nutritious. And so there are ways you can move the needle at very low cost. So that's generally where I would start. Now, obviously, as you evolve and you lay the foundation, then you can up your game.
Yeah.
And but I would start there. And for me, like, it's just been like you can be in a downward spiral of and I was there, where I was living on the kind of caffeine and alcohol seesaw and not feeling well every day. And you got to reverse that momentum. And then if you can get there, if you can really make those small changes and you get an upward spiral, then you have more energy, you can think more clearly, and then you can implement more strategies, and you can actually start, and it compounds on itself.
Yeah, so it sounds like when you talked about the 5 pillars, it sounds like when people think about where they need, first of all, you make a great point. You don't have to spend money to make real changes in your life. But what I would add to that is to say, if those are the 5 pillars, figure out which one of them is costing you the most in your quality of life. And then maybe you can dial that in a bit, whether it's the nutrition, or if you really do need to take your training to the next level, maybe you do need a piece of equipment of some sort or the other. So look at where the gaping hole in terms of this is causing me a quality of life issue. The last thing I'll add to that is to say, I think one of the blind spots of our society, because especially in America, we're go 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 go, is the most people I talk to, the most underestimated aspect of their health is recovery. They
Yeah.
don't value sleep, or if they're wanting to accomplish a particular weight loss or a training goal or even a run time, they don't value the time when you're not training as part of, like, how do you recover properly? And recovery does not mean sitting on the couch. That's another misnomer, is, oh, well, I'm off today, so I just sit around and watch TV and relax, which is a misnomer. But sleep, I think, is a big part of what you mean by when we talk about recovery. And you're right. I challenge people to say, tell me one time that you felt true joy when you hadn't had a good night's sleep in 2 days. It's very difficult to find a joy. It's just like, all I want to do is go to bed. All I want to do is get caught up.
Yeah, for me, it's very personal because I struggled with insomnia for a long time, and then I would have to power through the days with caffeine, and then I would have to forcibly wind down with alcohol,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's just a bad cycle.
It's
So
terrible, man.
so dialing in the sleep for me is huge, and then it's just anxiety and depression, which again are two sides of the same coin. Anxiety, loading up on caffeine; depression, loading up on alcohol, so you can
Yeah.
calm down. Um, all of these things, they're interrelated. I really think sleep is, and also even when it comes to weight loss, we've got a big obesity problem in the U.S. And for so long, it seems like the mantra has been starve yourself and then kill yourself with exercise.
For 30
And
days.
right, and then no, don't do that. How about you work on your sleep, and actually even just improving sleep can improve your metabolic health. Uh, so for me, and again, improving your sleep, it's just lifestyle changes that don't necessarily have to cost any money.
Mm-hmm. But as we highlighted at the beginning of this interview, the 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 thing that slips through the radar is all the things that are causing you to lose your sleep take place before you go to bed, right? The caffeine, the blue lights, the not winding down. Those are the things where it's easy to overlook that and say, well, as long as I get in bed by this time, I win. And it's like, that's not the whole picture, right? I love your focus on sleep, Scott. It's become a very big passion. Unfortunately, it is part of my me search. I'm constant. That's a big part of why I bought the red light, was in hopes of better sleep. So let's talk a little bit about the modes on the device. Okay, there's 3 modes, correct?
Yep. So most of these devices are actually relatively simple. So we're using red light, which is
Mm-hmm.
generally between 600 and 700 nanometers. Nanometers is the wavelength; it's a billionth of a meter. And then near infrared, which is typically 800 to 900 nanometers in these devices. So
Mm-hmm.
we're playing in what is known as, and you can look this up on Wikipedia, the optical window. There is this kind of very special window of the spectrum between 600 and 900 nanometers, where these wavelengths of light have very beneficial effects on the body. Below 600 nanometers, and part of it, there's a couple elements to the story. Part of it is that below 600 nanometers, the shorter high energy wavelengths don't penetrate that well into the body, and to the extent that they do, they get absorbed by hemoglobin, because the body has many different chromophores, which is just a fancy word for light absorbing molecules. So below 600 nanometers, hemoglobin is the major chromophore that absorbs the light. It doesn't penetrate that deep anyway. Longer wavelengths penetrate deeper, but when you get above 900 and 1,000 nanometers, you get into the mid-infrared and then further up into the far infrared part of the spectrum. And those wavelengths get absorbed by water and turn into heat. And so there's this very narrow window between 6 and 900 nanometers where you get the penetration, but you don't get the water absorption. And that's why that's a big part of the story for why these wavelengths are so beneficial. How they're able to reach deep into the body and tissues deep in the body, and how they're able to act on the mitochondria, and why they're so safe.
Okay. And the idea here, I assume certain ranges are better for ATP production, or do all 3 do great?
So the mechanisms of red and near infrared are generally the same. It's just the rule of thumb is the red light only penetrates a few millimeters, so it's generally
Mhm.
acting on the skin, and then the near infrared penetrates a couple of centimeters. Again, this is really depends on how you define penetration and what tissues you're treating, et cetera. So but it's just a guideline, and so it can near infrared can reach deeper into the body, act on the muscle, act on the brain, and but the mechanisms of the ATP production are the same.
Okay. So for if someone's wanting to say they've strained their shoulder in a workout, is there a mode you recommend and a distance that you recommend for that?
Yeah, so generally speaking, any deep tissue, you just want to make sure the near infrared is on because you want to get the light into the tissues.
Mm-hmm.
The red light won't get there. There's really interesting. It's again based on what we know. There's interesting and kind of counterintuitive research because there are studies showing that red light having beneficial effect, and you wouldn't think that because it just doesn't penetrate that deep. So how could it possibly do that? But there are studies suggesting that it does. So I would say for a deep tissue, you want near infrared for sure, and then probably just why not use both? Um,
Yeah, I was actually that was my next question was why not? There's a mode on your device that says have both of these spectrum on.
yeah,
Why would you take it off of that?
so one example might be for the eyes. Now our strict recommendation is just wear the goggles. The lights are very
Mm-hmm.
bright. There are some. Andrew Huberman had a good discussion of this on his podcast. I think a couple
Mm-hmm.
months ago,
I heard it. Yeah.
and there was a good study. I think it was in Japanese children where about 2 minutes of red LED light into the eyes improved some myopia. I think it was,
Mm-hmm.
and so that might be an example where the eyes are very sensitive, obviously, to light by design. And so maybe turn off the near infrared if you do a brief exposure, a minute or something, offset to the eyes might make some sense. Um, there could be other use cases where, let's say, you have a sprained ankle and you wanted to treat it while you're watching TV and you don't want the red light, illuminating the whole room.
Yeah.
You could just put on the near infrared. So we have the flexibility there, but generally speaking, for general health and wellness, we just say go ahead and use both.
Okay. You've got me thinking, especially when you talk about the spot treatment, it might be time for me to invest in another light like the ones behind you there because you cannot do spot treatment with a 1500.
No.
It is, it's like someone trying to have a laser pointer with a spotlight. It's definitely big and robust. Whenever I show the device to people, it's so fun.
The initial reaction
The
when you
initial
turn it on.
reaction when I turn it
Hello. Yeah.
on, and I guess mentally I've turned it off because I've done it so many
hmm
times. But when you turn that red light on, it's almost like they go, "Well, I guess I'm in hell now. Everything, all I see is red."
Red.
And yeah,
Well, I have obviously I'm blessed. I have many many lights, and I have a sandwich set up in a sunroom in my house. It's
yeah,
so if my wife's in there in the sunroom and I'm in the backyard, all I see is my entire house, glowing red. It
yeah,
just goes to the whole house.
yeah.
It's pretty cool.
So, speaking of people that use the devices, we sort of had the discussion. What do you find to be the primary driver of people purchasing your device?
Well, the number one seller is the Mito Pro 300, and it's a tabletop unit. It's about 12 inches by 10 inches wide on a stand. And so I would infer, but based on that most folks are buying the light for skin health. And
Yeah.
there's really good data on skin health, collagen. We actually did a really cool product study in Poland that we just got the results of, where we did LED light to the face and it showed benefit across the parameters measured. But we also did a pre-treating with an antioxidant serum. And the theory was that part of how red light works is it does increase metabolic activity, it does increase ATP production, but in biological systems, there's no such thing as a free lunch. So there is increased reactive oxygen species. Now, that's actually a good thing in balance because that also causes downstream signaling in the body to upregulate anti-inflammatory and
Mm-hmm.
antioxidant pathways.
Yeah.
But too much ROS, and that's why we say more isn't necessarily better. We're kind of looking for Goldilocks. So the theory was, what if we put some antioxidant serum on the skin, and 10 minutes before using the light, would we see an increase in benefit, increase in net benefit? and it turned out to be the case. So we were actually kind of excited about that. Well, I'm not in the serum business, but we are always investigating ways that we can think about suggesting to our customers to enhance the benefits of what they're doing. Uh, so,
Absolutely.
so anyway, the answer to your question is most likely skin health. There's good
Hmm.
data around red light and collagen production and wrinkles and inflammatory skin issues like psoriasis and acne and pigmentation issues. So that would be the number one reason by far.
Any studies that you know of that indicate that if people are taking collagen on a regular basis, that they tend to see more benefits because I assume it's more readily available for the skin to use?
So not that I'm aware of, although you and I are on the same wavelength, no pun intended, because I have been
Uh,
suggesting that as well. Because to me, if you're stimulating the body to make more collagen, it just makes sense that you would want to give your body a little bit extra of the building blocks
mhm.
to be able to do that. And so I personally take collagen every morning in my coffee that I have every morning. So I've been
Yeah.
doing it for a long time. And also, I
Of
think that we're generally deficient in
Yeah,
those
I
amino
completely agree.
acids as well.
I
So I think
completely
it makes
agree.
sense.
And I think it's going back to you were talking about the eyes and how humans have been around for so long. I think it's largely because initially primitive human beings ate or cooked a lot more with the bones,
Yep.
and that was just part of the diet. And it's not anymore. You never have to eat a bone these days, unless you just absolutely want to. And I started using collagen a little over a year ago. I did notice some obvious things like my nails grew faster and things like that. But it is the most palatable protein I could think of
Yep.
in terms of I throw it in my yogurt,
You don't even
and,
notice.
you don't notice. It has no flavor. And for the most part, I kind of steer away from the ones that are flavored just because it's already pretty neutral. It doesn't have an aftertaste. I honestly can't understand for the benefits. There was a study that Rhonda Kilpatrick cited during one of her podcasts that, as far as I know, it was the only protein they proved with by using radioactive dye on the mice, that when the mice ate collagen, it actually went to their joints because they could track the dye.
That's amazing.
And so,
I
as
love it.
as someone who was a very active athlete and constantly training, I was like, my joints need every advantage they
Right.
can have. So it really wasn't a big deal to start adding that to the mix.
Well, just anybody that wants to age well in general. I mean, the joints do seem to be one of the first areas that kind of start having problems. And so, why not be proactive about it?
There is a study that if you fall and break your hip, your lifespan is shorter than Texas death row. So it's very hips are when you break a hip as an elderly person, it is game over for the most. I mean, it's worse than a horse, really. When a horse breaking a leg, if you remember those things.
Yeah.
So tell me, just off the cuff here, what are your top three supplements that you think that people underestimate or could take advantage of? And it doesn't necessarily have to be in combination with red light, but you are someone who takes their health seriously. You're a biohacker of sorts.
That's an interesting question. So let me think about what I'm taking now. I owned a supplement company about 10 years ago. So like I said, I've tried a lot, but my thinking
Something
on
that
it.
you would stop somebody and say, "Man, you need to look into this because it shocked me."
So collagen, we talked about. The next one that I would say would be organ meats for the same reason.
Yeah, so I'm curious as to how you get your organ meats.
So there are two companies. There's a company called Ancestral Supplements.
Do you get the powdered ones?
I get them in capsules. I do like.
Capsule. That's what I mean,
I
though.
just like
It's powder
swallowing.
and yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think they're like dried out, desiccated, and then capsule. And then heartandsoil.co is Paul Saladino's company, I think. I like to rotate, so I like to rotate through the types of supplements. So I'll rotate through. I might take liver and kidney, and then I might take brain and heart, and just kind of
Hmm.
rotate. Um, or spleen. I mean, I've done them all, but I like to pulse things and go on and off. And then
Okay.
I think magnesium is probably the next one that
Yeah.
I would
Which
think
form
of.
though? There's a lot of forms. Which form are you?
So so not magnesium citrate actually. So
Okay.
and I'm blanking on but I go through Jigsaw Health, and they follow Morley Robbins' root cause protocol. And he is very knowledgeable on magnesium. And so the forms that they use, I think
Is it magnesium glycate for them?
I don't know offhand, but I've been taking that. I used to take citrate, and I think there's a product called Calm, and then I switched to Jigsaw, which I think is far superior.
Well, Jigsaw sells a Mag Pure glycate, so that's why I'm saying that.
Yeah, they have a powder. I use it every night. I've been having it every night, and I do wonder if that's one of the reasons why my organ meats and my magnesium. I'm wondering if they're part of the reason why my vitamin D is so high.
Okay. Well, you've got me convinced. I'll look at the glycate. I have a couple different. Huberman had mentioned. I do try different types, but magnesium malate was really good for recovering from workouts. I don't know whether it does
There's
or not.
3 and 8. There's this glycate.
3 and 8. Okay, so here's the thing about 3 and 8. It will. I took it without really researching it, and noticed I would get really tired, and only afterwards did I find out people take it before bed.
Sleep,
and,
yes.
Yeah, and all it says on the bottle is good for cognitive health. So I thought, oh, this will help me think. And I started noticing when I take it, I was so relaxed afterwards that I was
Well, that's good, but you just got to time it right, right?
You just got to time it right. So I just wanted to throw that disclaimer out there. All right, so I got magnesium, collagen, and organ meats. And I've noticed that I'm kind of surprised ButcherBox hasn't picked up on this. I've noticed these ButcherBox competitors saying, we'll sell you a pound of ground organ meats that you can use for tacos.
Yep.
And
well, I would caution against that if you've never had liver before, because it is rough. You know, you need to, if they mix it in with ground beef and and they cut it, like that's a way to hack it.
Their claim to fame was that it had like a taco seasoning in there that made it almost indistinguishable. So for what that's worth, and you're right, if you've ever had liver, it is just absolutely.
It's rough.
I can drink almost any healthy drink out there. I mean, the most disgusting thing I can think of that I unfortunately bought in bulk was a bag of unflavored essential amino acids that taste like gasoline, and I thought, man, if I can drink this, I can drink anything. But the liver, you actually have to chew that, unless you buy the powdered form, of course. All right, so one of the things you mentioned is that in some of your interviews is how red light therapy is a tool to offset the modern tech-induced sort of the woes of being the modern. And the way I look at that is there are so many advantages in today's society to being a knowledge worker, but what we also have to be cognizant of is the disadvantages. For example, people who sit at a desk all day. It's definitely something that has an appeal. When you're, say, driving a truck all day, you might think, oh, man, if I just were able to stay at the office. But we don't think about some of these things that we need to offset. So going back to your 5 pillars, it sounds like what you're saying is if you can manage your 5 pillars smart, great. But we also need to look at where are you doing damage in your day-to-day life. Can you give me some examples of how red light helps knowledge workers, and whether it's the screen time or just not being outside enough?
Right. So I would primarily it's just not being outside enough, and even in my own lifestyle, I try to get outside a lot. I go for a morning walk, I go for an afternoon walk, I try to be outside at sunset. But at the end of the day, I have work to do, and that requires me being right here in front of the screen, indoors. And so, absolutely, there's a really great MedCram. If you're familiar with MedCram, they did a 2-hour video, but the last from 45 minutes onward, they talk about just how our modern lifestyles and how we're indoors 93% of the time, and how the cascading knock-on effects of that. And really what they do is they talk about how the near infrared radiation exposure that we would get even just 200 years ago has dramatically reduced. And there's a lot of factors. I mean, there's the combination of the fact that we're spending a lot more time indoors as knowledge workers, or warehouse workers, factory workers. We're just indoors, or we're in our vehicles commuting. I think that so 93% of the time we're indoors. 86% is in a building, and the other 7% is in a vehicle. So we're not getting the near infrared exposure. And then it's now there's these other things like the lighting. You know, we actually used to get some near infrared exposure from incandescent bulbs, but those have been phased out, and now we get fluorescent and kind of these LED bulbs, which don't put out any near infrared unless they're specifically designed to, like our lights.
Yeah.
And now it's even further where we're installing things like low E glass, which is meant to purposely in these office buildings and other places. I just replaced my patio door, and I had to tell the guy I don't want the low E glass, man. So don't put the low E glass in that patio door because I want that infrared coming into the house because I know that it's important. And so I would say primarily the impact is, again, we're deficient, very in the same way that we're deficient from certain amino acids because we used to eat nose to tail and now we don't. We're deficient in this very important, we're deficient in sunlight exposure, but you can bifurcate that into infrared and UV primarily. And so it makes sense to in that, if you view it at that lens, it makes sense to supplement with near infrared in a safe way. And LEDs are an exceedingly safe way to do that.
I'll add to your point there and say that there's also a lot of propaganda about being scared of the sun. Like if you're out in the sun, load yourself up with sunblock and things like that. Not thinking about the potential disservice that they're doing to people when it comes to the proper amount of sun exposure.
Yes, totally agree. I think regular short bursts of sun exposure is actually quite necessary. And really, the story is actually quite interesting because, even I've evolved in this. So when I first moved to Phoenix, I was very excited because I'd moved from upstate New York, and I'm like, yay, sun. And but then I would, in terms of my lifestyle, I was just going out between 10 and 2 and trying to get 10 to 20 minutes of midday sun for the vitamin D. But that's you need to be a little bit more diligent about it. You do need to get the early morning sun. And for the preconditioning. And so another hack, this is another reason why I use the red light device in the morning, is it's been shown to precondition the skin and reduce sunburn. Yeah. Which makes perfect sense because that's how it happens in nature. You get that early morning infrared and it's telling the body, hey, in a few hours, that UV is going to be raining down on us. So you probably want to upregulate your melatonin and upregulate your antioxidant pathways so that you're ready for that. And so just even on a daily basis, just going out at midday, I think is not enough.
One way to preach that, Scott, is to leverage your financial background and say you need to diversify your UV portfolio.
Yeah. Well, diversify your sunlight portfolio, right?
Yeah, your sunlight portfolio. So that it's coming in at different times and different angles. I'll add to your point there and say, I think part of the reason that people have so many stomach issues is especially when they're eating a lot of fast food. If you ever cook a meal or you had a parent who cooked a meal, you have time to build up your appetite because you're smelling it and your digestive enzymes are building in your stomach so that by the time the food hits your mouth, your body's ready for it. The saliva, the stomach, everything is ready to break that food down. And there's a lot of research lately saying that there's problems with food not being broken down correctly in the stomach. Well, when you go through a drive-through, there is no buildup. You just drove through there and you don't smell it till you open it in the car. And that's where I go, every now and then when people just show up with a bag and just go right in it, I think, man, I would need a minute to smell it and get my appetite going, or at least be thinking about it. Because when you find people that, generally aren't even hungry when they eat, and they're eating that, I think, how much is that going to slow you down your stomach and allow proper digestion? So just like with the sunlight prefacing us for what's to come ahead, I think about it's in a lot of different contexts as well.
I totally agree, and that's actually a great reminder. I've some of these things I learn and forget. So I do make a shake every morning. I put a bunch of stuff in there. But I was in the habit, and I've kind of gotten out of it, of actually trying to chew.
That's right.
Even though it's a shake, and so trying to chew it a little bit because that is part of the whole process, digestive process, and I've kind of gotten away from that. So thank you for reminding me to do that.
If you're still paleo, I don't know what you would, which exact items you would do this with. A couple of items I can tell you to add to the smoothie at the very end, if you like to chew it, is if you add the oats at the very end, or if you add cacao nibs to it when it's nearly done. You'll end up chewing the smoothie very much the first half, and it does sort of accomplish that. The key though is if you have a Vitamix, don't throw that stuff in till the very last second, or it just emulsifies it.
Yeah.
The beauty of the emulsification is great with certain things; it's not with others. So well said. The last topic I wanted to make sure I got from you was when we talk about synergy and combos, we talked about how we combined supplements, but you had mentioned one of your favorite combos were breath work and vibration plate.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of optimizing things again. So,
This is the biohacker in you. How can I make the most of my time?
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So obviously optimizing the skin serum study, we were thinking about how do we optimize the skin benefits, but how can you optimize your time investment? Because it is a time investment. And so I am a big fan of either standing on a vibration plate, which I have one sitting here, um, or just doing breath work. I do think there's a lot to be said for resetting. A few deep breaths can be quite powerful, frankly, and
Mm-hmm.
or even one deep breath can be quite powerful if you do it right. Um, so you've got this 10 minutes, you're carving it out. It's your time to re-energize, to heal. It's your me time. And I really love the idea of stacking it with some sort of meditative practice. And I'm not a meditator at all,
Yeah.
but I do, for me, Tai Chi or some sort of movement with the breath. For me, there's something about, so I've always struggled with, I don't know, and that's why when I had insomnia, I used to just think that it was me, that I had an overactive mind. And that's how I kind of excused it until I realized it was the light environment that was really jacking me up. But even still, I do have somewhat of an overactive mind, so meditation I struggle with. But Tai Chi, the movement that's involved in synchronizing the movement with the breath, it occupies enough of my mind where I don't like struggle with it the way that I do
Yeah.
meditation. And and so I love doing just some basic Tai Chi while I'm in the red light
Yeah.
room out here.
Yeah. It's funny you say that. I used to tell people that the reason that I preferred trail running over road running was because it required enough of my eyes and brain because it was all on all this different terrain
Yeah.
that it was very hard to daydream.
Yep.
And so it required that I turned off my subconscious at some level just to be focused on what was going on in front of me. Whereas if I'm running a road or a track, I'm just wandering the whole time. I mean, I can almost shut my eyes half the time if it's a straightaway and just start thinking about all the things that I probably shouldn't be.
Right.
Um,
Right.
the one thing I'll add to the combo there is that um, I bought. We were talking about things where at the beginning of this interview where we forked over the money and whether it was worth it in our lifestyle. I bought a Hypervolt massager
Oh yeah.
3 years ago when those things were pretty big ticket items. That thing was worth I mean, I put it through the ringer. But during my red light sessions, it's not uncommon, especially if I've worked out a particular muscle group, that, for example, if I did my lower back that day, when I'm doing the front on the red light, I'll actually take the Hypervolt and hit my lower back, and it's really just a great wind down to hit before bed.
Yeah, well, I have one of those. I love it too. My wife got it for me for Christmas, and we just did a video shoot, and actually we're doing a giveaway, I believe, with Hyperice to another company called Own It Coaching,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm a huge fan of that thing. That's a great one. That's a great one. I mean, and again, I like variation. So one time I might do some Tai Chi. Other times I might go on a vibration plate. Other times
Yeah,
throw in the Hypervolt. I think mix it up so it doesn't get stale.
yeah.
Whatever works for you. But yes, those things are gold, especially when I'm sore. So
Yeah, absolutely. I started using a personal trainer a few months ago for my squat and deadlift form, which was horrible and it was causing me pain. I had to use that gun enormously more than I historically had to get those muscles loose. Nice to hear you're on the same page there. What studies, complete or underway, are you most excited about?
hmm, that is a good question. Well, the I, complete studies, I really, again, the sleep studies. Um, So there is a complete study that was done on sleep in elite Chinese female basketball players, and I love that study because they did 30 minutes of whole body red light irradiation, and then actually the device was about half it was about half as powerful as our lights, so it'd be equivalent to about 15 minutes with our lights. And these athletes, and they're elite athletes, they saw improved performance, they saw improved subjective sleep quality, improved recovery from injury, and measurable 2/3 increase in melatonin, like we were talking about earlier. So I love that study because, if you can get the body to make, a lot of people take melatonin for sleep, but if you can get the body to make its own, and there's this like simple, low cost, enjoyable intervention to do that, like it seems like a no-brainer to me. So I love that study. And again, because I'm a huge fan of sleep. And we're actually doing our own sleep study finally. And I'm excited to see if we can get similar results with the population. I mean, it just started.
Are you gauging it by subjective sleep quality? Is that what you're going by, or is there other markers you're looking for?
Yeah. So actually, I don't want to speak out of turn because there's he's a chiropractor, but he has a wellness facility in Oregon, and he has got some sophisticated equipment to measure sleep quality. And I don't know that much about it, to be honest. But it just started. And I mean, it's his wheelhouse. I just said, here are the lights, please do the study. And so he's going to do the study. And so we're excited for that because it would actually be with our lights, so whereas these other studies, it was red light that they were using, but it would be nice to actually get a similar result from our exact devices.
Wonderful. Well, I look forward to hearing the results of that, Scott.
Yeah, it's fun to be able to now get these things going. These studies can be expensive, but there's creative ways to partner with folks and do it, on the cheap, if you will. But still learn, right? Still learn and grow, which is the goal.
And then you got the data to support these statements. I mean, that's wonderful. Well, Scott, it has been a true pleasure. I hope to continue to evangelize your product and help other people learn the benefits of red light in their life. It's very much something that I feel is not just a fad. I think it's something that's going to be around for many years to come. I believe, the original studies with red light go back, like 50 years or 40 years, something like that, 1960s.
I think it goes even back into the 40s. There was a Hungarian scientist who was studying skin cancer in mice. And so or in rodents, and he shaved them and gave the poor mice skin tumors, and then he was irradiating the tumors with this red laser, and it was a low power laser. It didn't do anything to the tumors, but he noticed that the mice that were treated, their hair grew back faster.
Yeah, I would love to know the frequency. I would love to know the frequency he was using for that.
It was red. It was mid 600s. I want to say 660. I don't remember exactly. But all the helmets that are on the market, they all use red. It's like 660, 670. The hair loss helmets. There's actually a lot of good data on hair loss for red light. But I'm actually prototyping a helmet, but I'm not going to bring it to market until I start seeing some growth. I was going to have to go back to the growing. Yeah, I'm the first success story.
You include me in the pilot group for that thing. So appreciate your time, man. And
likewise.
We look forward to connecting with you again soon, Scott. Thank you so much.
All right, sounds good. Take care.